Welcome to Copy Chief Radio. Today's show is a freelancer's journey episode where successful freelancers share the tactical moves that catapulted their careers through the phases of the freelancer's journey. To see all 7 phases, where you are now, and how to move forward, head over to copychief.com/phases. To check out all the Copy Chief Radio episode types, go to copychief.com/CCR. What's up, friends? Welcome. It's Kev, and I'm with Ryan Schwartz today. And this is a long time coming. Ryan, I think the first time, at least I remember meeting, we did shots together and filmed it.
We did shots, yeah. I had already known a lot about you before then, because this is 2017. I got started around 2012, and you being the legend you are, like, how can I not know who Kevin fucking Rogers was? And I remember we're in the elevator, and I knew what I would be proposing we'd be doing for our first meeting. And man, I was scared shitless. I'm like, first encounter with Kevin, and I'm going to be asking him to be doing shots and recording it in slow-mo in like 1,000 frames per second. Somehow it all worked out, and grateful we had that moment.
It was great. And there was, well, legends. I mean, Paris Lampropoulos did it too in the same session. That was pretty cool, because Paris doesn't like being on camera ever, let alone doing a shot. And it was you and Joe. And are you still working with Joe?
Still have my courses featured in Copy School yet, and her and I kick it every now and then. But yeah, it was such a meshing of worlds, that event, which was what made it so meaningful, right? There was like the old school direct response legends, right? I remember Brian Kurtz was in the room. There was kind of the new wave. There was the Copy Chief world. There was the Copy Hackers world. And man, you get all these people in the room, and there's such a fraternity, no matter what your school of copywriting was. That's when I realized I'm in the right profession here, right? I'm in the right industry.
Yeah, that's the thing about those live events. You cannot replace that feeling in the relationships that start. Mm-hmm. There's always someone you would never heard of before and you hit it off, and they introduce you to this other world. You know, I've had this idea, man, because here's what I'm seeing. Everybody who does live events, like I did for 3 years, like Copywriter Club did for 3 years. I don't know if Joe ever did her own live events, but also Copy Accelerator was doing them. Everybody I've talked to isn't planning to do them again, because the 200 to 300 person events for companies like ours, digital product creators, is the riskiest, most expensive, most stressful thing you'll ever do in your business. You know, you become an events company for like 3 months of your calendar. And while it's such an amazing thing and such an amazing party, and it's really good for your standing in the industry and all that, it's very hard to justify when you're sitting there planning out your marketing calendar for the year. And so I thought, how did Perry Farrell do it with Lollapalooza? It's like, he should be looking at all these other bands as competition of, I got to make sure I sell it. And he's like, no, like, what if we had all the best bands play one event and just threw the greatest party? Why don't we just have like Copypalooza? Just let everybody come together for one big ass event and let it be Woodstock, Right.
And actually play some music.
Yes, and jam. Yes,
that's right.
Dude, those were the best parts of the Copy Chief lives. That was my fantasy. I literally treated the first one like if it was my own funeral. Like, no kidding. Like, it was like, okay, if I'm going to do this and scare the shit out of myself to do it, then I want everything to happen that I fantasized about. And the number one thing was seeing John play music.
Man.
I thought about that moment, and it scared me. And then I was like, well, now I have to do it.
Yeah, man, I got goosebumps just remembering that. Dude. Yeah.
I remember calling John to pitch him on the idea, and the fact that he didn't discount it immediately, I was like, okay. And then he started going into band leader mode, and he's like, all right, well, we did do it. It's like, we need the right band, they got to understand that these aren't players and and they'd have to know all the songs. And I'm like, oh shit, now he's fantasizing about it. Shit's going to happen.
Right.
So that's my fantasy. I'm putting it out to the world now. Copypalooza.
Copypalooza, right? Man, talking about Perry, right? Porno for Pyros. They came back together this past summer. That showed up on my YouTube feed. I have no idea what would have triggered that landing in my algorithm that I would have seen a live set from Porno for Pyros. A little concerned what YouTube knows about me.
They know everything, bro.
But I got the full union set. So there you go.
Did you go sue them?
Never saw them. I didn't even know that was Perry for a while, but I had a good buddy, the first guy with the car, right? You never forget the first guy with the car when you're like 16.
RJ O'Neill, that was my guy.
It was RJ. I had Scott Schley, cheers to Scott Schley, wherever you are. And he was the first dude with the car, and he had older sisters. So he had like all the CDs from their collection. And I'm not sure if they were real CDs or burnt CDs, probably burnt CDs. And one said Porno for Pyros. And, being a 16-year-old boy, I'm like, is this audio porn? What? Anyway, that's what goes through your mind, right? Yeah, totally. And you cue it up, and it was the most weird, strangest sounds ever, but you can't stop listening.
Right.
And that was my introduction to Porno for Pyros. I think that was back in like late 90s, I guess. I know they were from earlier, but there we go. Yeah. Never thought I'd be telling that story. So
that's what this show's about. I got to see Jane's a few months back open for Smashing Pumpkins. Took my daughter to the show, and it was killer. And I'm a bigger Jane's fan than I am a Smashing Pumpkins fan. Dave Navarro was sick, so he wasn't there. So the guitarist from Porno for Pyros stepped in. He was tremendous. It was so cool. And my favorite part was at the end, Perry was asking to do one more song, and the crowd was yelling for one more song. And they were like, yeah, you're done, dude. Because he rambled between songs like these weird non sequitur political diatribes that I'm all for a loose cannon. But it was like, dude, if you would have just held some of that back, we could have got one more song,
Right.
But anyway, that's a
lesson learned for him, artist. Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, maybe. But I don't think he would be any other way.
I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure I would turn down a meet and greet with Billy Corgan. Like, I don't think I'd feel comfortable with that. Yeah.
Especially with the strange kimono thing, just knowing he's pantless dress.
Right. It's a little unnerving.
No, he doesn't seem like a guy I want to hang out with. It's funny you said that, because there are some people think it's like would be the greatest thing to meet their heroes. Sometimes it is, but there are certain people that I regard so much that I wouldn't want to meet them, just because be afraid I'd say something stupid now that I'm tainted forever with my nightmare memory of them.
Yes.
To no fault of theirs.
Of course.
Like Tom Waits. I'm not going to meet Tom Waits. It's too intense for me.
You know who does a good Tom Waits? Our guy Addison. I've seen
incredible.
I've seen some of those covers. So bringing it back to Copy Chief bandmates.
Yeah.
But
yeah. He kills it. He's definitely got that vibe. Speaking of artistry, I love asking true writers who are copywriters this question. I consider you in that category. When is the first time in your life you remember writing something that impacted somebody else?
That impacted somebody else. Wow, I love the way.
Or got a reaction.
Sure, yeah. Ooh, that's a good one. 2003 to 2005, I was writing my own dating profiles, and DMs there. I was sliding to DMs pretty effectively, making an impact there. But for real, the first time I wrote something that I was proud of that was getting reactions was 2008. I had a marketing background. That's what I went to college for, got a corporate job right away, 21, 22, working that first corporate job, cubicle hell, that whole cliche thing. And it really lived up to it. I hate when things live up to the cliche, but it was cubicle hell. I'm like, fuck, you can't even write this. Anyway, I knew I wanted no part in that, right? Like, I felt the erosion of my spirit. Like, some people know when they feel like a pinch on their arm. You could feel the erosion of spirit. It's just like it starts wilting like a flower and contorting and twisting. And no, man, that doesn't feel so good.
There's no happy hour that soothes it.
No, not at all. You can't numb the wilting, right? The inner wilting. Right. And I remember it was around that same time. So 2008 was a magical year for my writing career. It was when The recession hit, corporate layoffs were happening all over the place. And I'm like, please, dear God, lay me off. Like, give me my severance package so I could just write full time. I knew I wanted to write. And what gave me the courage to write, it was that, I guess the same year, 2008, when the Brad Pitt movie where he ages in reverse, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
Benjamin Button.
Yeah, Benjamin Button. Yeah, that came out in 2008. And years earlier, so early 2000s, I was with my buddy, Scott Schley, the first guy who got his driver's license. So we probably listened to Porno de Pyros on the way to a coffee shop. And while at the coffee shop, him and I would exchange creative ideas all the time, right? And that was just our thing. We would envision things, whether it was like imagining a board game we wanted to create or a story we wanted to write or a short film. Like he was my dude for that. One of our coffee shop ideas, I'm like, hey man, like what would happen if we wrote something about a dude who aged in reverse? Like that would be pretty badass, right? And it's like, fuck yeah, that would be badass. And then of course, being, 16, we never did anything with that. And then Benjamin Button comes out and I'm watching the trailer with my girlfriend at the time. And like my jaw just drops. I'm like, Hollywood stole my idea. I was just like enraged by that. And it also gave me the confidence that, holy fuck, Hollywood's making movies based on ideas that I could generate. And then, of course, I do my research and it turns out Benjamin Button was based on a 1912 short story by, Scott F. Fitzgerald. And my rage was totally needless and unbased and all that shit. But it gave me the confidence there that like my ideas have value and can have value. And I never wanted to have another idea not have its chance to flourish or be expressed. So it was at that same job. Man, I bought a bunch of screenwriting books and I was trying to get laid off simultaneously. So, cubicle, screenwriting books, reading everything I can. And I started writing my first screenplay while at that job. During little cracks of time, lunch breaks, mornings in my car, after work in my car, just writing. And the first screenplay I wrote was called Fade to Black. And it was like, in retrospect, typical pretentious first screenwriter's drama. And like, it was a guy who essentially, the opening scene, you catch him kind of like dying in the parking lot, right, of some drugstore. That image came from a Third Eye Blind song, Slow Motion. I'm not sure if you've heard that one. I mean, he paints a scene of this guy bleeding to death in a parking lot. And instead of his life flashing before his eyes, he sees what would have happened if he continued living and didn't die there, right? And the whole premise was, is his untimely death a good thing or a bad thing or whatever? It was cool, right? I loved it at the time. I thought I was a genius at the time. I was cold calling Hollywood producers from suburban Montreal saying like, I got the next big thing. But I did share it and I did get it read. And it was the first time that it was a literary manager said like, the execution of this idea feels a bit amateur, but I could really see the writing talent here. And I'd love to read the next thing you write. And I'm like, okay, that's something. I wrote something in a car in coffee shops in suburban Montreal, and some manager, I think this guy was in New York, who represented some decent writers, decent screenwriters, said, this idea wasn't for me. The execution wasn't for me, but man, you got something and let's see where we could take this. So that was the first time.
That's great. I love it. It's a great story. What I take from that, man, is the sort of like blind ambition that goes along with the inspiration. I think that's the X factor, right? We see this all the time with copywriters, with any artist, where I remember writing, I was like a huge Jim Morrison fan when I was a comic, when I was like in my early 20s, read anything on Morrison I could get. And the guy who wrote Wonderland Avenue, Danny Sugarman, who was like Morrison's sidekick. He was like this kid, this young writer. And he wrote this amazing book about Morrison. And then I heard they were making a movie. This is back before the internet or anything, right? I somehow heard about this. And so I got the guy's address from the book or something. And I wrote him a letter and I sent him a headshot. And I'm like, I was born to play you in this movie. Like I get you on this other level, and your book impacted me. And I wrote this letter. And a few months later, I got like a form letter back where, it was basically to everybody who's written. It was just a nice like letter to all, it just meant the world to me that at least he got the letter and he read it. Right. And I made this list of people he wanted to respond to. They never made the movie, but what I take from that is the fact that I would do that and put myself out there and go, who knows? Right. Like I was just to be someone that you cold calling. We don't think about qualifications or how does this work. I remember there's a great documentary about Tom Petty that Peter Bogdanovich did. It's like 3 hours long, and Petty tells all these amazing stories. And the one that always stands out to me is them taking their reel-to-reel tapes to Hollywood. And they're like, okay, now we got to get into these record companies and play them for these people. And he went into a phone booth and he just started going through the yellow pages in a phone booth with a stack of quarters, or dimes probably back then, and calling these companies. And then he looks down and he sees a piece of paper on the floor of the phone booth, right? And he picks it up, and it's a list of all the record companies and their phone numbers. And his first thought was, wow, what a miracle that I found this. This is going to save me so much time. His second thought was, if somebody discarded their list in a phone booth, how many people are out here calling these numbers?
Right.
But it was first time it occurred to him, like there might be a lot of other bands doing this. You know what I mean? Like and so I think in every story of greatness, there is that origin of blind ambition.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so exciting and motivating at that time, right? Because you are like one yes, or even one maybe away from a life-changing moment, right? It's not like when you're established in your career, right? And a yes maybe takes you a little micro step away from you are, or kind of an incremental improvement. One yes can take you from broke, unemployed, sad, living on your mom's couch, like in Montreal, to getting a movie made with some of your idols and heroes. That's what always fueled me to do it. I'm like, and then, when I wasn't cold calling, I was sending out 20 emails in the morning, right? And then taking a nap at 1 o'clock, because that's what writers do when they're unemployed. And I remember I'd always go to take my nap at 1 and get so excited to wake up from it and see what replies I got, right?
Wow.
And I think that's what just drove that blind ambition. Was I didn't know better about the odds of breaking into film. And even if I did, I considered myself to be the exception, because you're in your early 20s. And of course, you're the fucking exception. But why wouldn't I take those swings, right? It was just so exciting to me. And I wasn't this big extrovert, right? If you saw me on the outside, I was just doing my quiet thing in the coffee shop corner, totally unassuming. Yet my secret was like, I'm like one yes away from this magic unfolding. And that's what got me up and got me doing that for, I'd say, writing screenplays full time for 3 years after that corporate job. I didn't get laid off.
Really?
We essentially had a game. We played a game of like HR chicken, where they're like, he's going to quit. He's going to quit. I'm like, you're going to lay me off. You're going to lay me off. And I remember having a conversation, like a fake heart to heart, with the HR director. I'm like, there's so many people in our department with families, and I would just hate to see one of them lose their job while, I stayed. It would just break my heart. And my acting was worse than my writing, apparently. and I quit. I cracked. And for about 2.5, 3 years, that's what I did full time.
Wow. Now, how does that happen? How do you actually get employed as a screenwriter?
I had the fortune or misfortune of finding traction pretty quickly. So that first screenplay kind of sucked, but got some attention. And then I switched to comedy. Comedy just came a lot more natural, right? Jokes just flowed, scenarios just flowed. Buddy comedy was blowing up, right? Obviously, Apatow was exploding at that time. Production companies, a lot of the big studios, they were all in on comedy. They were cheap to produce, right? Relative to the big tentpoles. And they were just exploding. So I found my groove in writing comedy. I could write them a lot quicker because I didn't need to do a lot of historical research, except for the time I wrote an apocalyptic sci-fi thriller set in 2030 with lunar colonization and Cold War with Russia. That's a story for another day. That one took a little bit more research. But yeah, for the most part, comedy just worked really well. And I got lucky, man. I think it was a combination of a bit of talent and a bit of luck, but I did start getting represented after just my second screenplay. I optioned my third, which had some cash up front, and I'm like, oh shit, this is actually
Wow.
easy. What's everyone complaining about? Right. I'm like, I'm on the fast track. And then my fourth screenplay didn't sell, but it got me a meeting with a producer who liked my writing and wanted to produce a hockey film. So this is when the Kings were winning Stanley Cups in like 2011, 2012. And people in Hollywood were like, hockey's the best fucking sport. Let's make a hockey movie. So I actually got commissioned or brought on to write a hockey script, and that paid my salary for, or paid my lifestyle for a little longer. And man, I just kind of kept getting enough momentum and enough bites to stay in that game full time for 3 years. And it was really anxiety provoking because never a big enough breakthrough to feel like I've cemented myself in this career. And that's where that got difficult, man. Cause like I was getting into my late 20s, 25, 26, 27, making $5,000 here, 15 grand here. And I'm like, not enough to really move out or start a family or live life. And also getting enough traction and momentum where I'm like, no, I'm not delusional. This can happen. Right. And I don't want to abandon this and go get an MBA or go to law school or do these other things I feel like I might need to do to make something of myself. And I didn't know about copywriting at that time. That was when, man, I was looking on Craigslist, and I remember I'd look at writing jobs and film jobs. Those were the two things that I was look at. And one day there was an ad for a copywriter for an agency in Montreal, and it was an English copywriting job. And I think there's maybe like 2 of those in the whole city because it's predominantly French here. I applied, I got it. I had no clue what copywriting was. It just had the word writer. And I'm like, well, I've been doing that shit for 3 years. So I got that part down. Man, I remember taking the interview with no expectations. I wasn't even sure I wanted it because part of me just wanted to keep doing what I was doing, feeling like that real breakthrough was right around the corner. So I didn't even really want the job. I remember I took the interview right before a music festival. Osheaga is the festival they have up in Montreal. I'm in my kind of like concert festival gear, about to go to that, and laid back in the interview and just kind of win the gig on, I guess, personality alone. I start Monday, I walk in, and man, I have my own office, right? Like a closed door office. And I'm like, holy shit, this gig might be a little bit more important than I thought it was.
I have to really fake my way through that.
Right. And
I might need sleeves.
Might need sleeves. Yes. I opened the computer, let it load. Google pops up, and literally the first thing, what is copywriting? Right. And I learned just enough in the hour and a half, I think, before the rest of the team got there to bullshit my way through the first team stand up, go home that night, consume everything else I can, learn enough to make it through the next day, then the next day. And then because you're so terrified of being called out as a fraud, you just soak things up with so much urgency to the point where like, okay, I know something here. So that's how that happened.
Incredible. These are great stories, dude. At what point do you go freelance and realize I can do better on my own? With a paycheck.
For sure. So that first agency job was 2012, 2013. And I was still doing the screenwriting thing. I was working on a web series. I had a few spec scripts going. One of them started to get a little bit of traction, in terms of, okay, this is getting real. We have our line producer, we have, a director attached. And I'm like, okay, this might happen. So I was never all in on the agency gig and always ready to leave it.
Mm-hmm.
The second there was enough of a taste that the screenwriting gig was going to pan out. But man, I started enjoying this copywriting thing, right? I remember going through everything I could find. HubSpot was putting out a shit ton of stuff in 2012. I remember going through all of that. Copy hackers, going through all of that. Your name came up a few times back then in my big deep dive, and copy blogger, right? Those were kind of the big four that I remember. Brian Clark, right? Consuming everything that I could get in that realm. And it was inspiring. I feel like that was kind of like a bit of a golden age, right, of copywriting online, at least for me, right? Because the online course industry was starting to really become a thing. Coaching was starting to become a thing. And if you enjoyed those two things and writing copy for those, man, you were kind of like at the forefront of something awesome. And that was inspiring to me. So yeah, I'd say I worked that gig for about 5 or 6 months, to the point where I started feeling really confident about my knowledge and interested in going back freelance, because it was never my plan or to endeavor to stay 9 to 5 anywhere for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I started, I think it was like answering ads or pitching myself to some local companies. And the first freelance gig I got was like $75 to edit catalog copy for an organic mattress company, like an hour north of Montreal. So I drove an hour to get the brief, drove back home an hour, and got paid $75 to edit their catalog. But I'm like, okay, I'm my own business here, right? I can make shit happen. And that gave me a lot of confidence. Continued to pick up some freelance gigs. And then what happened was I started getting more immersed in the online world, right? So naturally started tuning into people who were teaching online business. And I remember getting on a webinar for Danny Eni of Firepole Marketing, originally, now Miracy. And I was tuning in from a coffee shop. I did all my work in coffee shops because, it sucks working in your mom's basement, just does. So at a coffee shop, listening to Danny's webinar, does the whole, where are you guys calling in from? And I thought that meant something at the time, like, he really wants to know where I am right now. Like, I'm going to tell him, and I'm enthusiastic. I'm like, Montreal, Quebec. And I think he shouts it out because he's in Montreal. And that kind of blew my mind, because I didn't know anyone locally in the online space at that time. And at the end of the webinar, the sales page comes up, and I scroll all the way down, and I see like the contact or the legal information and see the address. And I'm like, oh man, he literally just did this webinar 10 minutes from where I'm watching it. Like, that is fucking cool. Him and I, struck a friendship, off of that. I just emailed him after. I'm like, dude, I was listening from 10 minutes away. You want to hook up and just jam on this? And we started chatting. He was so generous with his knowledge and his mentorship initially. And that evolved into me working for Firepole in 2013 or 2014. And he was my first mentor in the space. Would just slaughter my stuff over omelets. I think it was every Friday morning. We would meet at just greasy breakfast diner, and he'd have that red pen and just go to town on my stuff. And it was like, oh, Danny. Anyway, that was a transition. So I actually didn't go freelance right away. I wrote a few little projects here and there, but it ended up going from agency to a few small freelance clients to full-time again with Danny, but in more of a mentorship role, really getting to know the online space.
Look, I get it. I know there's so many communities, I'm doing air quotes, communities for entrepreneurs out there, all filled with their own version of overnight experts chirping at you from behind the screen. You got your Facebook groups, your clubhouse rooms, just experts galore. How often do you feel like you're being pinballed around from thing to thing and picking up a little bit, a little piece there? How much of that is actually making it into your brain and your fingers and your business and affecting your money? How many of these people are actually out there in the field getting their hands dirty and testing to find out what actually works and what flops? Well, in the Copy Chief community, a real community, you get shoulder to shoulder with the most active, successful marketers working in the trenches today, all while learning from industry legends who rarely teach anywhere else, if ever. Copy Chief is an amazing community, super newbie friendly. Also, you'll find, elite level marketers and copywriters in there. They're all working to become the best at their craft, get paid top dollar for their skills, stay ahead of the competition by keeping their finger on the pulse of what's working now. That's the X factor when you're backed up by a community and you can get any question you have answered by people who actually do this stuff and can tell you from real world experience what to do for your project, for your offer, for your funnel, for your clients, man, you're unstoppable when you've got that kind of confidence. Go check us out at copychief.com/join. If you've never been a member, you're going to see what you've been missing and you're going to say, where has this been all my life? And if you've been a member in the past, I would invite you to come and check out all the new stuff. We've completely updated all the tech. So we're on brand new platforms. Everything is slick and smooth and easy to access. And it's never been better. Copychief.com/join. I'll look for you inside.
It seems like you're a natural collaborator. The little I've seen of seeing what you do, I know Phil pretty well. He used to live here in town. I got to know Phil and Janice pretty well. And I know you. And so it seems like you've always kind of been partnered and you like to be part of a team, a collaborative, rather than, trying to step out as the guru and all that stuff.
That would be a very accurate assessment. It's always just felt like that has been a hack or a speed pass for me, or something where I get to kind of do what I do best, which is lean into my inspiration and go hard at it, right? And there are others that I'm collaborating with who bring their own skill sets. I guess that's what any partnership is, right? At the core of it. And that's just kind of how it sorted itself out. I've always just managed to connect with the right partner or collaborator at the right time for what I've needed. And it's almost felt divinely orchestrated, the people I've met at the times I've met them, and the magic we've been able to create in such a short amount of time. And when that has run its course, there's the gratitude for that, and you move on and the next thing just kind of evolves. So that's kind of how it's always flowed.
Yeah, very cool. But also, you have to figure out when it's not the right person or the right project. Right. I'm sure you've had lots of opportunities presented to you where you've had to decline. What have you learned about choosing wisely?
We're still learning that one. I get excited about possibilities really quickly. Not being in my 20s anymore, I'm almost 40 and energy is far more scarce, right? I have a family, all the responsibilities that come with that, and learning to really vet something for its true potential and not just my excitement or desire to work with someone because I like them has been a skill that I have really been honing in. I'd say for the most part, I've enjoyed letting things evolve organically. So I haven't gone into any big long-term business partnership without having first tested the waters, done one thing, enjoyed success with that, seen how we worked and said, okay, you want to do this thing now? Right. And kind of let it build and grow from there. That's very much how all my partnerships have evolved.
Yeah, it's the best way, right? Just test it out. I remember back at a certain period, same thing, just getting really excited about someone, about an idea. And back before, your vetting process is like, I bet people would love this if we created it. I'm like, of course they would. And then the next day you see somebody mention something like that on Facebook and you're like, oh my God, it's huge demand for this. There's like two people.
The data. Yes.
Yeah. And then you spend, months planning and talking. And at some point along the way, you start to realize like, this is not a real thing. And this is
exactly.
And so that is definitely one of the ongoing lessons. So I didn't realize you have a family now. And so how old are your kids? How long have you been married? What's that like?
Yeah. My son is 5. He just turned 5 about a month ago. We had his birthday party here, and it was the first birthday party we've actually thrown at our home, right? We moved into this small mountain town about 2.5 years ago. So 4,500 people in this town, mostly French speaking. Wow. And we've just kind of like stayed incognito. And then we decided to throw the birthday bash, right? The first one, announcing our arrival 2 years in. We invited the whole daycare, the whole kindergarten, all the friends, right? All the people we've met. Next thing you know, it like balloons from 15 people to about 50. And you have that one friend who offers to provide the music, right? There's always that guy. Shout out to Adrian, if you're listening to this. Adrian Awesome, dude. He offers to DJ the event. And I'm like, all right, he's going to DJ a 5-year-old birthday party. You know, what could go wrong? A few drinks in, I'll tell you what goes wrong with Adrian DJing. Picture this scene. Big backyard. The kids are all kind of like doing kid shit in the corner. I think painting pumpkins, because this was October. All the adults just kind of looking for a break from their kids, right? And, you know, the kids will be okay. They're painting pumpkins, they're jumping off rocks, everything's chill. Adrian decides this would be a great time to blast Limp Bizkit in the backyard. So I think he's going with My Way. The mood shifts, as it often does. And
Limp Bizkit arrives.
Right. And I think he had just seen the Woodstock documentary, because that came out around the same time.
Yeah. 1991 or whatever. Yeah.
And he was in a mood. Anyway, Limp Bizkit is blasting. And I'm not stopping it, because I'm like, all right, you know, I could get behind this. I don't want to break Adrian's flow, right? He's offered to DJ this party. You don't want to cut him off. Anyway, so that's going on, and we're in the Limp Bizkit haze. And then about 10 minutes later, you know, flashing sirens pull up to the front of the house. And me being in my state, I'm like, someone called the cops so that the kids could play with the sirens, right? I thought that was just like part of the entertainment.
This is so sweet.
And, right? Like, this is so sweet. The kids are going to have a ride along, you know? And no, it was a serious noise complaint. So I'm struggling to address the noise complaint in French. And I'm like, c'est en fait pour notre fils. Ils sont tous 5 ans. And I'm like, they're 5 years old. And then like the cops don't see the hilarity in the fact that they just got called to break up a 5-year-old's birthday party. And that's what happened, dude. I mean, my son turned 5 and yeah, now we're
handcuffs.
In handcuffs, yeah. Like, it was all his idea.
Back of a cop car.
All his idea. Tried to talk him out of it, you know.
We tried to keep him away from the DJ booth, but
right,
he's a slippery bastard.
Exactly.
Oh,
so next year we'll just hire Fred Durst. You know, he'll just do it.
It'd probably be cheaper than whatever fine you played.
Exactly. So yeah, one 5-year-old.
So funny, dude.
Exactly.
And so, do you feel more part of the community now? Is it? I'm sure you have some friends from that.
We've announced ourselves, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. Your coming out party is
exactly, and you know, being a small town, stories get around. Like, you become those people in an instant, and you can never break that reputation. We're the people who throw ragers for a 5-year-old. So
yeah, we like to have parties, and I have neighbors on one side who are both cops, husband and wife. They're fine neighbors, but they're not very social people. Mm-hmm. And so the first 2 parties, we did the safe thing and invited them, knowing they most likely wouldn't come, but at least they knew about the party. Mm-hmm. And then the third party, I saw him out front and I was like, hey, just so you know, we're having a party Saturday night, because their bedroom is like right on the other side of our fence. And we got the music, the windows like are pretty good. And so you can't hear, we have live band in the living room. It's a musician's party. We just want like everybody who loves to jam. And it's just a jam all night long. But there's people playing games in the yard and everything. This time, and it seems like I only run into the guy when we're about to have a party. And so I couldn't bring myself to tell him this time. I'm like, I'm not going to say again to this guy, oh, by the way, we're having another ranger on Saturday.
Right.
But they've been pretty cool about it. They haven't called themselves on us yet. But
nice. Call themselves, right?
Yeah. Just show up with the uniform on.
Yep.
And sleep in their eyes.
I am not here in a neighborly capacity. You'll respect my authority. You're speaking to the badge. Business. Yes, exactly.
And now I think this is your own project. You and Phil did 6-figure emails, which is different. How so many, this is before there were a million copywriting programs. It seems like our email program seems like that's the hot flavor now.
For sure. So yeah, the email programs I've created, you know, there was 10x launches, 6-figure emails, 7-figure emails. Those were created back with Copy Hackers, actually, and original part of Copy School. With Phil, I decided I wanted to create a program that would be impossible to pitch in 2 minutes or less, and be one of those things where you're like, it's a copywriting program, but it's also an automation program. And there's lead scoring and rockets and dinosaurs. And it's going to help high ticket coaches, but it's also going to help. Anyway, it was one of those, like, it was a kitchen sink program called Automated Intimacy, which was like everything I've ever wanted to geek out on with advanced marketers. Yeah, that's what it was. And I loved that. So people read the copy for that page and they're like, I fucking love it, but I have no idea what it is. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted. I mean, I was lucky that my audience, bless them, are just really smart, advanced marketers where they almost don't want the obvious pitch. They want to feel like they're walking into some esoteric, advanced hallway where they're going to get the sacred teachings passed along from 2,000 years of an immortal copywriting sage, right? And I feel like it had enough of that mystery and that flavor to attract those people. And of course, for those who already had a lot of strong foundations, that program with, the advanced stuff with how to combine automation to create what I call conversion context, these sacred little moments where a DM, right, or a personal exchange can speed up and accelerate the conversion, just added another really sharp tool, right, to their toolkit.
Yeah.
So that was fun. Automated Intimacy, when we first launched it, if you Googled it, Automated Intimacy, we ranked behind an article talking about sex bots as the future of intimacy in America. That kind of sucked. I'm like, shit, we gotta outcompete this article right now. And our campaign on our relaunch a year later was, I think the first email was, we officially outranked the sex bots. And that was like the highest converting email in the whole stack. So Automated Intimacy, we own the term now. That's been the core thing with our friend Phil Powis, the wizard, and combining his genius and mine, and just been fun. One thing I've always kind of vowed, in this space at least, is unless I'm kind of pushing the envelope myself, right, and innovating in ways that are exciting, at least to me, probably not going to be sustainable. So people signed up for it. That's
great. Cool. And so it's a course, or is it also, it sounds like obviously a system you install in your business. And so there's a tech component as well.
Totally. So it's mostly playbook based. It's not an A to Z program. It has this foundational module of what I call coaching the conversion reloaded, right? And that's all about the theory that I've been kind of running for, 8 years right now, that the conversion is not a single event, right? But a sequence of events and all the precursors that we could actually reverse engineer into our funnels or our sales ecosystems. So it's based on that as the operating system, along with Phil's kind of automation operating system, tagging structures, how to set up pipelines and active campaign, all the nerdy stuff that I would never touch if not for Phil doing it. And then the playbooks are really bolt-ons to existing funnels that would accelerate, the speed of conversion. So I'll give you one example, because right now I'm just using a bunch of buzzwords, but I'll use the example of how we launched it, right? So we only had we were going to launch it with a webinar funnel, and our list was tiny at that point, probably 800, 900, but really high quality prospects, right? People who have been following my work or his work for a while. And we wanted, I think our goal was 30 sales out of this on I think it was a $3,000 program initially. So 30 sales out of an 800 person list. I'm like, that math is a little ambitious, right? But let's roll with it. Let's see what could happen. We get about 100 webinar registrants, right? I'm like, that's good. That's about what we could expect on this list size. And if I just did the basic math, we're not going to get 30 sales out of 100 webinar registrants. So we used our own playbooks, right? So one of them is the pre-webinar ramp up. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I could send, the typical show up sequence, and that's great. And we essentially need 100% show up rate if we're going to come anywhere close to our conversion targets. So it's like, okay, as soon as Active Campaign alerted us that Kevin signed up for the webinar, I would just get on my iPhone, right? Record a video for Kevin. What's up, Kev? Saw you just came in. Just wanted to show my appreciation for you being here. These are the things we're going to cover. If there's any questions you have between now and then, let me know. Oh, and here was a magic line that I guess worked like crazy was, oh, by the way, if you can't make it for whatever reason, please just let me know so we could take you off that list. I'd super appreciate it. And it was the anti-anonymity, right? Now you are seen, it feels real, and we are in relationship. And it took maybe 2 hours to do that with the full webinar list. And the show up rate was about 65%, which is just bananas for a marketing webinar. So that's the example of how we leverage the automation with the intimacy, especially when you need to get the most out of smaller lists. And then same thing on the post, right? We could rely on follow-up sales emails, and we had those, but those were simply scaffolding, right? They were there to just provide signals of who is clicking on those links. If someone clicked on the link to the sales page, our volume was so low that why wouldn't I just, send another voice message? Like, what's up, man? Thank you for spending that time with us. Just wanted you to know that I'm around if you have any questions and anything I could do to help you make a decision by Friday, right? So prefacing it that we're in relationship, right? And a binary yes or no is what is being requested for the appropriateness of this conversation. So we hit our goal. It took that combination of the scaffolding, which is the funnel, right? And having that set up well in advance, and then giving you enough space to just add those intimate touch points in the moments that they would actually drive a conversion, whether that conversion was a show up or the sale. So we got 9 playbooks on that. And that is how we now outrank the sex bots.
It is very cool. I love hearing about this. It's pretty relevant to what we're doing. We've been doing what we call conversational conversions for a long time as a protocol. We refer to it like the Dean Jackson, the 9-word email kind of method, right? But interestingly, basically at the end of testing out cold traffic straight to coaching call, because similar, like, I have a coaching program and we're not looking for just anybody to sign up. We want to have these conversations, but having cold traffic want to trust to get on a call and be qualified. Getting people to fill out the application is no problem. Having them be qualified for this program has been a problem. And so I think we're going to go back to a system that it sounds like you're describing. So maybe worth a conversation to see how this works, because, and I know I've talked to Phil a bit about over coffee a couple of times about some of his technical wizardry.
Yeah.
It's fast.
I would always get jealous about those breakfasts. I'm like, I want in on these St. Pete's breakfasts, right? He'd come back on Slack and he's like, guess who I saw this morning? And I'm like, Phil. Anyway.
I tried to get him in my band. I told you that. He was like, he came to see my kid play. And he was like, man, it was so fun and inspired me to pick up the guitar again. And he sent me a little clip and I was just, we have this like play band. I was like, dude, just come jam with us. And he kept saying he would, but he never did. I just know it would have been so fun because it's so hard to convince somebody that seriously, there's no pressure. Like whatever you can play is enough. I get it too. Like if I was, especially with an instrument, walking in and suddenly like some guy starts tuning up and,
right.
And you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was why I didn't come or it's just timing, but
I don't know. He's got some skills though. He does a decent Ryan Adams. I think that's
I love Ryan, dude.
Yeah.
My wife and I just went, I didn't know that about him. Heartbreaker is one of our records. We hadn't heard it in a decade. And something got me on playing it the other night. We were sitting around the kitchen, drinking wine, listening to that record. It's such a great record, dude. That one and Lucinda Williams, you had heard Car Wheels on a Gravel Road.
Yeah.
Dude, I think it won the Grammy that year. It came out like 91. What an amazing record. Cool. And okay, so I want to talk about, I think it's your latest project, I See You King.
Yeah.
This is fascinating to me. And it kind of makes sense how you talked about wanting to be a little obscure. And maybe because I signed up for this because I partly as research and partly because I found it fascinating. It definitely wasn't like your typical, I feel like I was being marketed to like, hey, you need this thing. It's an experience you want to invite people into, it feels like to me. So tell me what it is, what inspired it.
It's a slow play for sure. It's not something where we're trying to make an immediate sale. it is a vehicle really for my honest reflections and my writings as I kind of lucidly or semi-lucidly walk through, fatherhood, relationship, entrepreneurship, and essentially all these, what I call the initiatory fires of our lives, right? It all started, with fatherhood 5 years ago. Dude, I thought I had shit figured out then. 2017, I was on fire, right? Career was in full swing, doing well with that. I felt unshakable peace and indestructibility. Fatherhood hits me, and we weren't planning for that. It happened almost miraculously. And that's a story for another day. But yeah, that was like a 1 in a trillion odds, right? And I exaggerate that number, but probably 1 in several billion if we're being scientific about it. Man, October 2017 hits me like a ton of bricks, and I get initiated into this thing called fatherhood. Obviously, relationship takes on so many new dimensions overnight. Entrepreneurship and duty and providership takes on a whole new level. I realized I had been coasting on easy mode prior to that. And now this responsibility to rise into the man, right? And face all these victim-y voices that are in folded arm refusal to step into that role, just start showing up. I was reeling, dude, and I couldn't find someone in my life I really trusted to guide me through that. I had coaches, I had good friends, but like initiations are so personal, and what arises for you is so personal and intimate that I just turned to the tool I had always had, right? I was writing. I was writing every morning, what I was experiencing, what I was being called into, what I was being initiated into. It started flowing into a book. I never thought I'd write a book, let alone one in this space. But the title just came, The 7 Initiatory Fires of Modern Manhood. And I'm like, I'm a father, I'm a partner, I'm running a business, I'm trying to thrive physically and mentally in an unhealthy world. 3 years prior to that, I was half paralyzed with a stroke. And I'm like, I'm battling to stay healthy in this world, and obviously mentally and spiritually as well. And I'm like, initiation hasn't disappeared. It's just coming in these new packages and not getting the reverence that it deserves. So I started writing this book as a way to coach myself through those fires. That led to me sharing those essays under my pen name at the time. And they were just going bonkers on sites like the Good Men Project, being picked up on Medium, and just getting, hundreds of comments, probably tens of thousands of followers on that. I'm like, all right, maybe there's something to this. And the writing felt so real and honest, and with no urgency for that to be a business or anything other than an expression of where my own authorship is heading. So yeah, the book was the first major piece. I wrote the majority of it in 2019, 2020, and then did nothing with it for close to a year. I just put it away and decided I'd see how I feel about it later. And then last year in my Facebook group, the Empire Engineering Facebook group, just put out that question. I'm like, let's say I wrote a book, who should I talk to? Right. And one thing leads to another. And next thing you know, you're in a publishing process. And I'm like, all right, if I'm going to create a company around this, a brand around this, a new coaching company around this, let me give myself a long enough timeline for that where I can really do it without needing to make such an immediate sale. So that's where I See You King came to be, as a newsletter that would grow the list for the eventual book release in May. And at the same time, be a place where I can curate just incredible coaches and programs and leaders who teach within those 7 fires to, I guess, from a business perspective, build a really robust affiliate backend for the book. On those 7 fires, I don't go deep into the tactical, right? Instead, I have a resources section that I wish to populate and will be populating with recommended materials and programs and people who are just doing incredible work there. So yeah, that's the story behind I See You King and the book.
Wow. That's so cool, man. So I love this theme of this whole conversation is you like just being true to yourself and your inspiration. doing the work you need to do to pay bills and do things. It seems like that's also inspired work, but yet never stopping the more meaningful stuff that it sounds like happens either by pure fire of inspiration or deep need for yourself, and then seeing where it takes you.
That's a good assessment, man. It blows my mind that it's been close to 15 years of doing this writing thing. That was such a fucking pipe dream that I can make a living doing that I could make a living just doing what feels true and what feels real. And I got chills thinking about that, because when you're in your early 20s and you just want to do what feels good, and that feels like such a fucking mountain, to relax around the idea that, man, not only can you make a living off it, you can have a tremendous career and make so many amazing friends along the way and find community and family within that. That gives me chills. And that tends to be something I lose sight of in the day-to-day minutia. And it's so true, right? 15 years in, you think of the relationships and friendships you've made, right? And the impact you've had through your own business. And
it's crazy.
Man, the way you built it is what inspires me, where you never amputated any pieces of your own genius and creativity, right? Where there's music going on and you're selling your event with a comedy show, right? And that to me is everything, dude. But you don't have to amputate any piece of who you are and what you're doing, and you still get to build a brilliant business that so many resonate with.
That's cool, man. It really is such a gift, this weird industry we all somehow find ourselves to. It repels a lot of people. It confuses a lot of people. But if it's for you and you discover it, chills is exactly what I always think about. I literally used to get chills. I would feel like the skin on my arm tingle when I thought about the possibilities of what I had discovered, and wasn't afraid of it, and was like, no, I know I can be good at this. And I don't know what this is going to look like, but this is the thing. Just that clarity alone to find the thing. And then, as you're describing, there's no rules around what it looks like or where it takes you or what you're able to do, because it's still writing at the heart of it. Right. But we know there's a way to pay our bills with it. And we could sell out on that at any point along the way and just collect our money. Or, like you said, we can stay true and bring ourselves to it. And if we're fortunate enough for who we truly are to resonate with a large enough group of people who appreciate the authenticity there, man, it's the greatest gift ever. Some people say to me, don't you miss comedy? I'm like, why? What I miss comedy when I have been able to build an audience of people that I get to impact way more than with just a laugh. We have some laughs along the way, but if my only goal was to get them to double over a couple times, it's an admirable goal, but this is way more fun.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I agree, on the same side as screenwriting, right? I haven't touched that industry since 2017. And I had that final heartbreak, which was like right before my son was born, and a project that was so close to the finish line of just like moving into production, right? It had an actor I literally grew up idolizing. I had posters of this dude on my wall as a kid, and now he was reading my character and eager to play it. And
that's crazy.
I'm like, all right, this is going to happen. And Hollywood being Hollywood, one little thing, right? A schedule conflict here, a disagreement there, and the house of cards just falls and collapses. And I'm like, I could pick myself back up on this one, right? I could. And I have, at that point, it was literally a 3-week-old child in the next room. I have this beautiful career I've been able to build in the copywriting space. Copy School was a new venture with Joe at the time. And I just went all in on that at that time. I'm like, this isn't a compromise. This isn't secondary to quote unquote art. You get to live artfully through this craft and through entrepreneurship and through these relationships. And I've never regretted not going back into the screenwriting world. So yeah.
Incredible. No, this is great too. We have so much, we're so aligned in these things, and there's a lot of interesting similarities. But really what you said about show business, It really is that, dude. My best friend in the world is a pretty successful actor, sitcom actor. And the miracles that have to happen for him to be on TV and keep happening for him to sustain this career. Like you said, all it takes is one bad lunch between two important people. The whole thing's gone. We get to decide and we get to call our shots. Like we'll never not work. What a blessing.
I love that.
All right, Ryan, this has been really great. Wish it hadn't taken so long for us to do this, but it feels like it was the exact perfect first conversation of which I hope we'll have many more.
Took the time it took, brother. And in the meantime, in those 5 years since, I've had the video on my Dropbox. I've kept paying my Dropbox bill just so I don't lose that video of all you guys slow-mo drinking whiskey shots. Every now and then I'll screenshot it and send it to Sam Woods. And I'm like, I got this on you. Anyway. Yeah.
Sam Woods, the greatest ball buster in our industry.
Cool, man. Well, I really appreciate this jam. Thanks for having me.
Likewise, man. Thanks for making the time. Good luck with everything. We'll be in touch and we'll do it again soon. Links will be in there. And so if you like to go deep and don't like the obvious, Ryan's your guy. Check out his stuff. Thanks, man. We'll talk soon, Ryan.
Appreciate it.
Hey, don't forget your goodies. Head over to copychief.com/copychiefradio to get some great free stuff to help you put the things you hear on the show into action for your business. Copychief.com/CCR.